Greetings. I've decided to start recording chess videos on YouTube. For my first one, I've selected a game that I like to show my beginners to illustrate Underpromotion. And without further ado, let's get to the game. So, as you can see, I'm using the chess.com analysis board. The game is one between Dave Taylor, a correspondence master, playing white, and someone whose name is not known, so NN for no name. The game began in a perfectly ordinary way, e4, e5, pawns occupying the center. Okay. And then white's king's knight develops. So the g knight goes to f3 and attacks black's e5 pawn. So what does black do? He develops his queen's knight and defends his e5 pawn. Okay. And now you might expect here white to play bishop to b5, which would be a Spanish game, or Ruy Lopez. You might expect bishop to c4, which would be an Italian game. And if black played bishop to c5, then it would be a gioco piano. You might possibly expect d4, a Scotch game. You might even expect knight to c3, a three knights game, which could turn into a four knights game. But white was an expert in the Ponziani opening. He'd even written a book about it. And he played c3. It was the Ponziani opening. Black developed his king's knight and attacked white's e4 pawn. And white said, go ahead, take it. He played d4. And black did go ahead and take it. And now white could have taken the pawn back by playing dx e5. But he recognized that black's c6 knight was the only thing holding up that e5 pawn. It was the only thing preventing this knight from taking it. So he said, go away, knight, by playing d5. And the knight did go away to e7. And white did take the pawn on e5, evening this game up materially. So each player's taken one pawn. And now, at this point, the computer recommends knight to g6. And, the game would just proceed. At this point, the computer gives the evaluation as plus 0.33. The plus means white's better. The 0.33, well, 0.3333333333 is forever, is 1/3. So 0.33 is about 1/3. So white's about 1/3 of a pawn better, according to the computer's evaluation. Okay. White has the first move. He should be a shade better, so okay. And now black makes a move that looks perfectly reasonable. Looks like a perfectly good move, and yet it loses. Watch what happens to the evaluation after d6. All of a sudden, plus 5.23, white's crushing black. Really? But d6 opened the diagonal for the bishop to develop, for the light squared bishop to develop. It controls a square in the extended setter and a square in the setter. We recall that the setter consists of these four squares, so it controls a square in the setter. And the extended setter includes these squares, these 12 more squares. So this pawn controls a square in the extended setter. And because it's attacking the knight, if the white knight has to retreat, well, then black has gained a tempo. Because white couldn't develop another piece, he had to just retreat his knight. White couldn't do something else he wanted to do, he had to retreat his knight. So it gains a tempo. So how can this be bad? It looks fine, but it turns out it's terrible. Now white's move here is bishop to b5 check. He moves this bishop all the way out and gives check. And black plays c6. And now white has two pieces hanging. Two pieces, all prise. You only get to make one move. So which piece do you want to save? How do you save both of them? So if you were back in this position, and you were thinking about playing bishop to b5 check, and you saw that black could play c6, and that then you'd have two pieces hanging, you should have asked yourself, how am I going to save both pieces? And unless you really knew this opening the way the white player of this game did, unless you really knew this opening, unless you could see that this would be okay for white, unless you could see that, you simply shouldn't make that bishop to b5 check move. You shouldn't do that. You should retreat your knight, save it, because it's under attack. However, the white player in this game was an expert in the Ponziani opening. He did note that this would be just fine. Okay, so he winds up with two pieces en prise, but he's okay. In fact, he's more than okay. He's winning the game. So now what does white do? What does white do? Well, he plays dxc6, so this pawn will no longer be attacking the bishop. So that saves the bishop. Now, how does that save the knight? Can't black just take it? Well, actually, if black takes the knight, then there are two ways for white to win. One is by pushing this pawn check. It's check because the pawn used to be there in the way of the bishop. It used to be in the way of the bishop, so it's not check. But once the pawn moves forward, that opens up the diagonal, and it's check. And the pawn attacks the queen. So if he says, okay, I'll play bishop d7 and block your check. Okay, fine, white will take the queen. You just took his queen. And yeah, okay, you lose the extra queen. But still, black just lost his queen. That's good for white. And of course, if he escapes this attack by moving his queen forward to block the check, well, you're still going to get the queen. So that's good enough to win. That's good enough to win. c7, the c7 move is good enough to win. But even better, okay, so even better, okay, even better is pawn takes. And again, it's discovered check. It's discovered check. Not a lot of ways out. Can't move the king. If you move the knight here, well, we'll just take the knight, and it's still check. And we're still threatening to take the rook and make a queen. He just lost the knight. If instead you block with a queen, well, you'll lose your queen, right? If you do this, that looks like the natural move. Well, then white could take this rook and promote to a queen, and then black can't take the queen because if he does, he gets mated. But that's not even how I play that. If black blocks with this bishop, what I would do is queen takes bishop check. It's also what the computer would do. And then the only move is queen takes. You can't take with a king because the bishop protects it. So the only move is queen takes. But then you take this rook and promote to a queen. You just want a rook and a queen on one move. For a pawn, okay, you gave up a pawn, but you want a rook and a queen. You took a rook off the board, took one of his rooks off the board, and you added an extra queen to your arsenal. And then he can't block with the queen because his queen's pinned. And the king can't go anywhere. All he can do is block with the knight. But then you can take the knight. You might be tempted to take the queen, but I think it's probably better. It's probably better to take the knight. And the queen, the black queen can't take the white queen because it's pinned against the king. So all black can do is move his king forward, and then white takes the queen. And at this point, you look at the material. Black has a rook and a bishop and a knight. White also has a rook, a bishop, and a knight, but white has some extra. White has an extra queen, and an extra rook, and an extra bishop, and an extra pawn. That all adds up to 2 extra queens worth of material. You think white can win with that? Yeah, white can win with that. White can win with that. So the upshot is taking this knight is something black can't do. He'll lose catastrophically if he takes the knight. So this move saves the bishop because that black pawn is no longer attacking it. Okay. But it also saves the knight because if black takes this knight, he gets killed. So black tried something else. Now, the computer prefers it if he takes here, and then white takes. And then if black comes out, this knight comes back here, and that's discovered check. And the knight guards the bishop, so the queen can't take it. And the knight blocks the diagonal, too, and guards that square. But that's not what black played. What black played was queen to b6, which threatens checkmate. Threatens checkmate. It also, of course, threatens the bishop. And eventually, maybe taking this knight won't be catastrophic for black. So white still has to be careful here. Well, white goes ahead and takes the pawn. Discovered check. Discovered check. And if black takes the bishop, then he's no longer threatening mate. So then white can take the rook and promote to a queen. Okay. But black didn't take the bishop. Now, if he blocks with his own bishop, well, then we can take the rook, make it a queen. It's check. He can't block with the bishop because the bishop's pinned against the king. If he blocks with the queen, then that's checkmate. The bishop is protected by the knight, so the king can't take it. King can't take it. And the queen can't take it because the queen is pinned against the king. The power of the pin again. Pin, pin, pin. Okay. So if he blocks with the bishop, we take, and all he can do is block with the knight. And then we take, because again, the bishop can't take. Pin. So the king has to escape, and then you take the bishop check, and the king can only come out, and then check, protected by the knight. And yes, you're giving up this knight, but that's mate. So is that. And for that matter, so is that. They're all checkmate. Okay? They're all checkmate. So, back. So blocking with the bishop here doesn't actually help. Doesn't actually help. So what did black do? He moved his king. Now you would love to take this rook, promote it to a queen. Yay, you just gained a rook and a queen in one move. Yay! But black's not in check anymore, so checkmate. Okay, well, that wouldn't work. You could conceivably take the bishop, turn it into a queen, and that would be check. That would be check. And black would take the queen, and you would gain a bishop that way. But I don't think that's your strongest move. Instead, you use this knight to give check. And yes, it's a fork. Yes, it's a fork of the king and the rook. But what you really care about in this position is that it's check. Because it's check, black can't stop and administer checkmate. He has to get out of check. And he can't go to those squares because of the bishop. So he only has one square he can go to, king to c7. And now, you might like to take the rook. Unfortunately, that'll get you checkmated because the knight isn't checking here, is it? The black king's not in check. You might want to take the rook and promote to a queen. But if you do that, black's not in check. So he gets to administer checkmate. That won't work. But what will work is taking the rook and promoting to a knight, underpromoting, because that way it's check again. So black has to get out of check. He doesn't have time to administer checkmate. He has to get out of check. What's more, that's a fork of the king and the queen. So once the king moves, white takes the queen, and that's the end of the game. Black resigned there. Black's getting killed. Okay, so that's a cute little game. We just run through it. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, perfectly normal. C3, a bit rare, Ponziani opening. White was an expert in the Ponziani opening. It's perfectly playable, it's just rare. Knight to F6, attacking White's E pawn. And White says, go ahead, take my pawn, and Black does. And instead of taking back here, White kicks away the defender of that pawn by playing D5. And the knight goes away. And then the white knight takes the black E5 pawn, so each player has taken one pawn. Material is even. And then black plays a move that looks perfectly reasonable, but that loses, D6. And white makes this move that you should only make if you can see beforehand that after black plays this, white's okay. Even though white has two pieces hanging, white's perfectly okay here. If you know that, okay, go ahead and play that bishop move. But if you don't know that, don't play the bishop there. Save your knight. Save your knight. Maybe move it to F3, but rescue your knight. But if you can see that after the bishop move and the pawn move, when you have two pieces hanging, if you can see that that's okay for white, oh, all right, then go ahead and do it. And the white player did know it was okay. White took the pawn, which saved the bishop because there's no black pawn attacking it anymore. And now taking the knight turns out to be catastrophic for black, so he can't do it. So for the moment, you saved both pieces. Black played queen to B6, setting up this mate threat. So white has to be a little bit careful. He plays CX B7, check, discovered check. Pawn got out of the way of the bishop. So now it's a discovered check by the bishop. And if the queen takes, well, then he's not threatening mate anymore. So you can go ahead and take the rook and make a queen. Okay, you can do that. But he doesn't take the bishop. And he doesn't block with the bishop when you could take the rook and make it a queen because it's check. So he doesn't get his chance to checkmate. But he didn't do that. He moved his king. And then knight check. And yes, it's a fork of the king and the rook, but we care about the check. King moves. And now we can take the rook, but we have to underpromote to a knight so that it's check. That's check. And it's a fork of the king and the queen. King slides over, we take the queen. And that's the end of the game. So that's a rather cute little game. I like it. It's only 13 moves long, but I like it. So that's the end of that game. And I think I will use a different sign off for my chess videos than I use for other videos. I think for my chess videos, I'll start using the sign off, try to win, but more than that, try to play well.